Hello, pocket knife community, knife lovers, knife enthusiasts, interested viewers. I want to do a comparison, and I did a couple of videos on this knife already. I just got it not that long ago. I did a couple of overview videos. This is the Microtech Stitch. Like this knife a lot. So I just want to do a final video on it, sort of like after having it for a couple of weeks, how I feel about it. And I'm going to also make this video as a comparison between this and my top knives. And I'm going to say that that actually is a really big statement because the price point for this knife, this is the stitch in the aluminum stitch, aluminum fluted stitch with the stone wash finish, plain blade, non-serrated blade, and with the ram lock. All right, so it's the ram lock version of the knife, and I am very impressed with this knife. Does it have its shortcomings? Yeah, it does. Of course, every knife does. But yeah, it definitely does. But it is a very good knife, especially for the price point. So, along with talking about the final 2-week conclusion, carrying this thing for the short period of time and getting the hang of it, you learn things when you carry a knife. When you have something and you use it for a while, you learn stuff. But I'm also going to compare it to my top knives and 3 of my top knives. And so let's just start off with the knives I'm going to compare it to. One of them is my Demko 8020. This knife is from 2020. It was in Grivory, and now it's in the original GOAT Shark's Tooth full titanium unlined, unweight saving scales. Okay, that's one knife. The other knife I'm going to compare it to is my Koenig Arius. Koenig Arius is in M390. This knife actually, in my opinion, has no flaws. It's one of the best knives I have. I believe it's one of the best knives, period. I only own one of them. I just don't have any desire to buy more than one of these knives. I'm not really sure why. It's such a great knife. Like, why wouldn't I have another version of it? I've seen a lot of other versions of this knife, and I'm just not interested in them. I love this with the titanium textured mill titanium textured scales. The way it is right now with the drop point blade and the hollowed out drop point blade with this full broadsword shaped blade is just absolutely incredible. This is one of the best pocket clips ever made. Is the fact that how short it is, how functional it is, how good it works, and how amazing this knife just melts in your hand. If anybody is not familiar that's watching this video with the Koenig Arius, this is a knife that it's not cheap, but I will tell you it is absolutely worth saving your money to get one of these. I've heard very few people say that this isn't one of the best knives they own. So that's a lot comparing this knife to a Koenig Arius. And my final comparison is going to be my Hinderer XM-18 3.5. This one happens to be my slicer grind, and this knife also is not in its absolute original configuration. If anyone knows Hinderers, they know they come with an absolute terrible edge on them from the factory. The edge they put on their knives are just enough just so that you could claim it's a knife. It is dull. It does not sharpen. It does not cut. And they do that on purpose because a lot of people who buy Hinderers want to put their own edge on it. This happens to be the no choil slicer grind, and it is a full custom hollow grind put on this knife. So yeah, so the fact that but I will say that the knife is already a slicer grind. Okay, the type of blade shape, slicer grind, meaning this is the type of cutting. You lock the front down and you cut. A lot of food prep is use slicers, and but so that's what that is. So comparing the stitch to this group is really saying a lot, because the price point, You know how many stitches you can buy? I just made a funny. How many stitches you can buy? Snitches get stitches. And you know how many you can buy? All right, anyway, how many stitches you can buy with the price of these knives? A lot. You can buy a lot of these. So putting this in the group from price point is saying a lot about the stitch. Okay, so let's just get into it. We're gonna start off with cutting. Okay, so in the cutting area, okay, the stitch is one of the best cutting knives out of the factory a lot of people have ever seen. A lot of people in the knife community have ever seen, and I agree. I own over 100 knives and even razor knives, and this thing cuts better than them. So, like I said before in my other video, you know, I'm sure how sharp, how slim it is behind the edge plays a huge role in how it cuts. But it is an amazing cutting tool. Okay, the jury's out on the long term with the stitch on how it will do when people are using it to cut things that are tough to cut. How good will that edge, that beautiful edge it has, how long will that stand up with the M390 MK, the proprietary metallurgy for Microtech from Bola, which to put out their own. Is it just marketing? Is that MK at the end of the M390 some special right? So is it something that's going to make that the stitch edge hold up better? I mean, listen, the stitch has been out for a while. There's probably people out there that can answer that question right now. Okay, but anyway, back to what at hand. I don't want to get too far off of it. So comparing it to, let's start off with the Demko. Okay, so in the Demko, the stitch in the cutting area, the Demko, the stitch is obviously going to beat the Demko. Obviously, the Demko is a saber grind, and it's set up for toughness. Okay, can you have these hollowed? Absolutely, and people do have them hollowed. I would never have mine hollowed because it's not the purpose of this particular knife. This knife is a hard use, tough knife, and you want to keep that really robust edge for hard wood crafting or any hard heavy duty work, not for streamline cutting. So in that area, the Demko is going to fall short when it comes to the stitch. Next, we have the Koenig Arius, which is actually a hollow grind. So this knife with this tall broadsword blade that it has, amazing, cuts extremely well. Just and then I'm going to tell you, well, I'm not talking about overall cutting when I'm making this comparison, guys. Okay, I'm talking about just how well these knives pass through light material. Okay, this isn't really a comparison based off of this is not a scientific comparison based off of the entire cutting geometry of all these knives. I'm talking about taking these blades in their present form and just how nice it cuts. Because I'm going to tell you right now, when we do cutting tests, right, when the ability to see how much rope or how much material blades and edges can cut through stuff, at the end of the day, okay, we almost always go back to paper. You ever notice that? It slices through paper easily. Now you do the torture test, and how does it slice through paper now? And be honest with you, the torture tests are based off of when you go back to the paper, how well does it continually cut through that paper? How well does it after you're cutting through that paper nice and easy, after you've tortured that edge, when you go back, does it still cut through paper? And basically, the bench point is really determined by when it doesn't cut paper easily anymore. So, we can't make light of knives cutting paper because it is a metric by which we judge the edge of something. So yeah, so basically I'm gonna give the Microtech the edge. I made another funny. I'm going to give it the edge. I'm going to edge it. The edge, get it? The edge. All right. I'm going to give it the edge over the Koenig Arius. It's close, but the stitch just passes through so amazing. And then finally the custom grind put on the Hinderer, which is in the no choil slicer grind blade, which is actually an amazing cutting tool. As easy as this knife also passes through paper, I am really gonna have to give slight edge to the stitch. So this is really the order here. You know, it would be stitch, you know, the Hinderer, the Koenig, and of course the Demko would definitely lose in this category. It's supposed to. Okay, they're close. This custom grind on here is amazing, but I still say that this stitch passes through material amazing better. Okay, so the next category would be the action. And the action is how, when you are deploying the blade and retracting the blade, the action is how the knife moves, how it opens and closes, the action of the knife. Okay, so in this situation, we have two knives with drag and two knives without. And what do I mean by that? I mean that these knives have locking mechanisms that add drag to the blade. So the stitch has a spring back here, and this is the sled for the ram lock. And what happens is when you deploy the blade, if you notice this, the ram lock is moving back. That's because the blade is pushing on the ram lock, and that is called drag. It's dragging on the ram lock. It's pressure is being applied to that blade the whole time. Then it pops forward. Okay, so that's the drag that's created when you deploy the knife. Same thing with the shark lock. Shark lock works in a little bit different way, but it's still basically the same thing. The shark lock has the entire top locking mechanism here. This is also spring-loaded. I'm not going to get into the details of it because it's not necessary, but it's spring-loaded, and the tang of the blade rides on the bottom part of this. There's a focal point on the bottom where the tang of the blade rubs on it. The spring adds tension. So as you see deploying the blade, the sled is moving back and forth. When you pull it back, at a certain point, it even rises up, and then, boop, it pops forward. That's drag that's created from the locking mechanism. Now, the Hinderer and the Koenig do not have drag. Not like that. These knives are frame locks. So once you break that detent, once the detent is broken, the lock doesn't really play a role in the deployment anymore until it opens. Once it's open, then the lock does its job and catches through. And even on retracting it, you pull the lock to the side and the blade runs freely and closes. So these knives have the ability to open and close, technically should be a lot quicker than these because they don't have drag. So in this category, okay, the action. The Koenig Arius, like I said, has no weaknesses, and its action is incredible. It fires open as fast as any knife out there. It's got a deployment hole and a frame lock, and you can tell by the way it sounds. It is just absolutely insane, and I would give this extremely high marks on that in that area. Same thing with the Hinderer XM-18. This knife also is a frame lock, like I said, and the action is absolutely flawless on this knife. It has a thumb stud that's set in an area where the reverse flick is just absolutely incredible on this knife. So you can use the flipper tab if you want, light switch or push button, and you can also reverse flick this knife extremely good. So it has, both of these knives have excellent, top-notch, 10 out of 10 action. The deployment is absolutely perfect. And now you come to the two knives that have drag, and so you have the shark lock against the ram lock. And I will tell you right now, unequivocally, that the shock lock blows the ram lock out the water when it comes to deployment and action and the lack of drag. This is the most, the shock lock is probably the strongest lock out there of heavy duty locks that aren't frame locks, that once deployed, the blade just goes completely free. Even though there's drag. It's just amazing. I mean, just the way this thing fires, the action of this thing is just absolutely incredible on this knife. You would think that it was like a frame lock, how easy it moves. Whereas the stitch, even though the reverse flick is very satisfying on this knife, I'm not saying it's not, it cannot compare to the shock lock. You would have to actually deploy both of them yourselves to really understand what I'm saying and experience what I'm saying when it comes to it. But make no mistake about it, in this category, 1, 2, 3 all are equal at number 1, and the stitch comes in second. So there's not going to be no 1 through 4, first, second, third, and fourth in this. It's 1 and 2, because the action on these knives are incredible. I will tell you that right now. It's one of the reasons why I've fallen in love with them. So it's a very amazing, amazing thing. The tolerances of the manufacturers and the action of these knives are no compromise. Now, I haven't had the stitch as long. You know, maybe the ram lock will break in a little bit and be different. I'm not exactly sure. I'm not saying this is bad. I'm just saying it's not as good as these. There is a drag. There always will have to be a drag, because the ram lock has to be able to really go into that tang and lock in. If you have a lighter spring on here, that creates less drag. You run risk of the sled not seating properly and giving you a safe operation while the blade's open. You don't want to try to increase the action of something at the expense of making the knife more dangerous. It makes no sense. The knife has to be safe. It has to be a safe tool, but have that ability to have incredible action. Fidget action is one of the things I'm talking about, and these knives are just incredible in that area. So yeah, the the stitch loses in that area. Okay. Okay, so the next category is going to be ergos. Okay, so the next category we're talking about is ergos. And ergos, the reason why I put ergos in here is because, my opinion, ergos are the most important attribute of any knife, in my opinion. How that knife feels in your hand. If you have a knife that's just too small for your hands, too small. I can't cut with this. This thing is, you know, it's just not, I can't get pressure on it. A small knife cannot do a job of a big knife. A big knife can do jobs that small knives can do. If there's a job that requires a big knife, there's no way a small knife will be able to task that job. And that's just what it is. When you're talking about hard use, you definitely want to have a knife that's big. You want to have a knife that fills your hand completely, that you get in hand and you can really work it, and you don't want anything with hot spots that's going to hurt your hand. You want really good ergos. So for me, ergos are number 1. And with these 3 knives, they are absolutely, for my hands, they are absolutely flawless with their ergos. All 3 of them. The Demko 8020 is just absolutely incredible. It's a tad bit tight, just a little bit because of the downturn back here, but not anything that I mean, if I had a choice, I would want more of a release here, but I'm nitpicking, and it doesn't really matter because I can fit in there with no problem, and it feels fantastic in hand. I don't feel the pocket clip at all, and whether I choke up, whether I reach out for the jimping on the blade in this manner, or whether I'm back here on the ramp, on the shock lock, it doesn't matter. It just feels absolutely perfect in hand. Like I said, Koenig Arius has no weaknesses, this knife, in my opinion, none. And ergos is one of its absolute best features. it feels absolutely incredible in hand. This area where you have this sort of spread in the design, your thumb fits so perfectly on it. The rest of the knife has a complete release in the back, so you feel no pressure in the back of that finger, regardless of how big your hands are. And the pocket clip is just absolutely invisible. It is just, you feel, you could take this clip off or leave it there. I mean, you don't even feel it at all. It is just extremely good ergonomics for this. And anyone that's watched my channel know how I feel about the Hinderer with ergos. Hand melting ergos. Just beautiful. The width is perfect. The way it sits in your hand. The way that the flipper tab is set up as a finger guard, and it has no heavy spots or no sharp parts, nothing. It's just your finger fits right there. Just amazing ergonomics on these knives. They just really, really good. I can't stress how good they are. It's one of the reasons why they're my top knives. This is another area where the MSI is gonna fall short. As good as this knife does feel in hand, I'm not saying it doesn't. It has a few shortcomings with its ergos. Choked up, it actually feels better than in the back, right? So back here, if you're just gonna utilize the handle, it's not perfect because I just feel it doesn't have enough handle. I feel like there's an area here, for me, it's just not thick enough where I feel my hand doesn't feel fully engulfed in this like that, like it does with these knives. These knives totally fill that area inside where it just is really inspiring that the knife's not gonna slip out of my hand no matter what I'm doing. So you don't get that back here. You do get it up here. So when choked up, this thing feels amazing. But when I do choke up, I feel the pocket clip more. So being up in the choked up position, the pocket clip rams into my ring finger, the palm of my ring finger, and I can feel it. Down here, I don't feel the pocket clip, but it doesn't feel as confidence inspiring. So that's the shortcomings of that. So it's gonna fall short there. Okay, so the final category is just overall feel. Well, I think we've answered it, okay? In cutting, it beats all three of these knives. But I knew it would be because it's beat every knife I've ever had, especially factory knife. I would have to buy something, you know, that has a custom edge on it, that's uncompromising for slicing, even at the expense of toughness, to beat this knife. And neither one of these knives go to that extreme. So that's the only area where it excels. But like I said, it beats everything I've ever had. And like, I have over 100 knives, and even razor blades, even razor blades I own don't cut as good as this when it comes to just slicing through paper and light material. So that's why, you know, for me, it's pretty incredible with that. But everywhere else, it does fall short. Okay, the action, the ergos, and the overall feel, it doesn't quite eclipse my top stuff. But I'm gonna tell you right now, with the price point, I have to go to some of my top stuff to get stuff to beat this knife. This knife is definitely an excellent knife. It's definitely worth the price. And the fact that the aluminum version is cheaper than the G10 still blows me away. You know, it looks incredible, and it does, it's a good knife. Yeah, it's definitely a good knife. So anyway, this is a long video. It actually turned out to be my longest video. Really didn't want to do a video 24 minutes, but it is. So I appreciate you guys watching. All right, take care. Thanks for watching.